Namaste everyone. Again, I am Goyal and welcome to the fourth module of this lecture series. This module is on learning systems, learning methods across the country. This is particularly close to my heart. I think learning systems, learning designs, learning mechanisms, and configurations of learning, learning how to learn, these are the bedrock of what your culture is made of. Cultures are actually meta configurations of learning. If I want to invoke Bal Gangadhara's body of work, and therefore, I think dwelling on learning systems across Bharat will be a very, very interesting exercise. What I want to do is, I want you to think about the way you learned in your schools and colleges. There are, of course, learning padyatis, shiksha padyati, and learning methods that have percolated over generations, over thousands of years in the traditional Gurukulas. But what I also want to show is that these attributes of Gurukula learning are also scattered across mainstream education. In fact, whenever mainstream education and Gurukula education are separate, we will be able to find why Gurukula systems often reflect so much of our inner desires about what education and learning should be. I will also try to show how different parts of the country, different kinds of Gurukulas, Jain Viharas or Bodha Viharas, or even mainstream education spaces, or our own aspiration about learning are very similar across the country. And they're very different from how the West views education in some respects. So to give you an example, for instance, in Bharat, in India, education is typically not considered as something which is separate from life. It's like education is life. It's so important. I mean, traveling across the length and breadth of this country, a very unique feature is reflected. Everybody, no matter whether the person is a banker or a construction laborer, they all want their children to get educated. This urge to get education for your children is so deeply rooted that even though knowing fully well that your child could be sitting with you in your shop, or when you're selling vegetables, you still want the child to go to school, no matter how mediocre the school is. You want that education to happen. And this is this just reflects a deep-rooted Jeevan Darshan, that education is not just a pathway to a career or a degree. It's basically an important aspect of living, of life itself. And the other thing is that a lot of our education and learning happens through performativity, through practice, through experience, through observation. We do this all the time. I mean, remember how many times you were verbally memorizing what you had to read, what you had to give in your exams, or writing and learning the answer. We perform, we observe, and so experiential learning is really at the core of how we learn across this country. Our learning is also centered around the student, not around the system. And through the course of this module, I'm going to give you so many examples that will bring and drive home the point. In fact, think about a gardener, and I think that's a very good analogy to discuss or to even imagine the learning methods of this country. You see, a gardener will treat every plant differently in the same garden, right? So a cactus or a palak or maybe aloo or maybe a flowering plant. Each one of them will require different amount of water, different amount of sunlight, and different treatment even for manure, etc. And this is what Bharatiya Shiksha Padyati tells us. That every child is different. And so your education has to revolve around the needs and the alignment of that child. Not an industrial system where you have this conventional pattern where everybody is going to get the same standardized education. Standardized education is not the hallmark of Bharatiya Shiksha systems or Bharatiya education and learning systems. In fact, it's not unusual for us to have so many tutors and tuitions and coachings because we think our child needs something different, which the standard system is not going to provide. Surely there are all kinds of other career motivations, and there's this herd mentality that we go to coaching institutes. But remember, in your childhood, when your parents asked a friend to come and teach you something because you were not very good at, they're not blaming the teacher. They're also not blaming you. They just think, well, you need something different, some different way of engaging with you, and that is happening through this uncle or aunt coming to your house, or you going to their house, and they're telling you how to solve this math problem. And this person is not just giving you a skill. Really, what teachers do in this country, or we expect our teachers to do, is to make us wise, is to make us responsible citizens of society, is to make us feel that we belong. Skill is not the end goal of learning systems in Bharat. It's what do you want? What do you grow up as? How intelligence is one aspect, but the other aspect is wisdom. Am I able to engage with life better or not? So the Gurukula also functions like how a gardener does, right? The Guru will observe the child's prakriti, the temperament, the strengths and weaknesses, and accordingly mold the child as the child grows up into a well-formed individual, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, and of course, skillfully. Skills and career is not the only goal. In fact, you know, balanced life, free from stress, free from comparisons and competition. This is the hallmark of Bharatiya education system. These are the spaces around which Gurukulas are built. These are the goals through which Gurukulas pursue their life goals. And sometimes when we find such teachers and such learning spaces in our mainstream schools, parents are very happy. It's about understanding. It's about development of character. It's a career is just one expression, one form of learning. Wisdom is the ultimate goal, and that is what we expect our education system and learning to do. Let me spend some time on this idea of motivation and purpose of learning, because herein lies the deepest, most philosophy and the Jeevan Darshan of learning systems in Bharat. I'll tell you. So, for instance, if you go to a regular school or a college, starts with a timetable. Everybody in the same age group are put into the same classroom. Fairly industrial model, and I think many scholars have also highlighted how industrial system is reflected in the way our education systems are. Meeting deadlines, finishing portions. All of this is focusing on the course. I mean, our education system, the mainstream education system, the schools, colleges, the modern, quote-unquote, modern education system is built on finishing the course. Have you done your syllabus? Have you finished your deadline? Have you submitted your assignment? When do we talk about you as a student? What about you? About your nature. Most Bharatiya Shiksha Paddhatis across the country, and I'm going to come to some of the examples, highly reflected in these Gurukulas, but also somewhere sprinkled across in mainstream education, appreciate that the education must be centered around the child, something that I just mentioned. The starting point in Bharatiya learning systems and methods is very different. It's not for marks, degrees, or future careers. It's understanding what is it that brings ananda. And I can't really translate ananda. It's not joy, it's not just happiness. It's not bliss, but maybe it's a mixture of all this. How do we bring ananda in learning and through learning as one of the pursuit for the student? I mean, that's the idea, that learning should be natural, joyful, deeply aligned with what the learner is. In fact, before anything is taught, they ask, what is the nature of this child? What will help this child grow with balance and clarity? And this is where the difference is very clear. I mean, in a conventional school, on the first day, maybe you're handed textbooks, you're grouped into sections like I was saying. The child is expected to adjust to the system. The system doesn't help the child learn based on who the child is. And we're all different, actually. I mean, we know this very well. It's basically like trying to create a round peg for a square hole. We're trying to change the hole, not change the peg. In these systems, teachers actually don't even get time to understand students properly, deeply. That relationship is not built. Learning becomes as if you have to manage something, not something that you grow through. In Gurukulas, Devalayas, all of these spaces, if you were to visit, and there are thousands of them in the country, unlike what many of you may want to believe, and please refer to our reading material and you'll know some of them. The first step is alignment, not adjustment. They don't have entrance test. There's no filtering. There's no assumption that the student have to learn in this way. And so parents remain at peace. They know that the teacher and the student will be engaging in some discipline fairly joyfully. In fact, for several days, the child is not put into an academic track. So for instance, Ved Vigyan Gurukula, student from there, They explain how for 3 to 4 months the guru will watch you, how you sit, how you listen, how you react to new situation, where is your curiosity and where is it fading, and if you're ready for this commitment, then only after that will the guru start engaging you after this testing period. And so you are observed because the guru really wants to know what is your alignment like. You know, in Chennai Gurukul, for instance, and many others, sometimes the kundali of the child is also looked at, not as a matter of fate, but as a tool to understand temperament, of orientation, natural strengths, emotional tendencies, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's extremely important. I mean, think about it this way. Let's say I'm an angry person. Let's say by nature I am someone who gets angry very quickly and short-tempered, perhaps. Maybe some of my students say the same. Will I? So the system will need to recognize that if this is the case, what is the type of reading material? What is the type of experience that I should go through in my childhood or through my learning, so that I am able to evolve out, if at all I need to evolve out, rather than suppress it, conform, and maybe become unhappy about so many things in life. That makes me even angrier, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's again like the gardener example is coming back to my mind. Sometimes Gurukulas, they also look at child tridosha, the vata, pitta, kapha, the bodily, mental, and spiritual functions. We know from Ayurveda these different doshas, and so we know what kind of improvement the child requires. I mean, you don't get, if people are sick, you don't give them same medicine. Every medicine must respond to specific ailment, which is individually different. And the same thing for learning. Your mind is formed differently. You've had different types of childhood, different types of parents, neighborhoods, all kinds of experiences. Now, I don't want to give you the same thing that I'm giving the other. Well, you'll say that there are administrative challenges. How do you do this? Well, it's being done in the Gurukulas. In fact, it is also being done in schools and colleges in different ways that we know. And the idea behind all this is very simple. If we spend 15 to 20 years of learning, shouldn't we do it in the way that matches who we are? In fact, these observations that Guru does slowly reveal child's swadharma, their natural path of learning. Swadharma, it's a powerful statement. Like, I think you should look it up. But your natural pace of learning, natural path of learning, for instance, the child may love music, but this boy or girl has to do mathematics. You may have sharp analytical mind, but you're judged because you scored bad in your science or math. And so students are often stressful, they're struggling to cope, they're never really discovering who you are. And the Bharatiya Shiksha system really allows you to discover who you are. And therefore, when we hear parents say, oh, my child is studying so much, but always stressed, always unclear, why do this happen? Why does this happen? And the other way around, what is the characteristic of a learning space where this does not happen? Should take a look at some of the Gurukulas. Mainstream education knows this. I don't want to say that this is some new knowledge. Sometimes they respond to it, but not always. Traditional systems are built specifically to respond to this. And that's what we need to understand. For instance, trust. And I'm going to talk about Guru, and the trust between Guru and parents is so high. In India, for most part of, at least when I was growing up, and even now in small towns, I think parents come to teachers and tell the teachers, we're not going to talk to you, we're not going to complain. Just teach my children to become an adult. That's what we want. Do whatever. I mean, this type of trust that we are giving our child to you is extremely rare. So this is not transactional of a relationship. The students also trust the Guru because they know that they're seen and not judged all the time. And this process becomes collaborative. And so education is not something for job preparation. It's something far more powerful. Again, the purpose is not to perform or not to outperform, but to understand who you are. That's really the goal. And this is not something, the best way to call it is some inner maturity that comes out. And that's really what we want. That's something that we all understand, relatively difficult to get in the mainstream education, which is, constructed through some sort of a different experience in the West. This philosophy learns through almost all Gurukulas, traditional learning systems, traditional learning spaces across the country. Whether it's a Gurukul in Andhra, Devala in UP, Upashra in Gujarat, or Math in Karnataka. All of them follow the same method. You will see them differently. You will see their engagements they look very different. Maybe they physically, their design is very different, but deeply, at the bottommost of its philosophy or its Jeevan Darshan, you will realize they're all the same. Thank you so much.